Hi, what is your name and what do you do?
Hey, my name is Gael Murara, and I'm an investment banker.
Perfect. So I understand you moved back from Canada. What were you doing before moving back to Rwanda? And what was your life like before moving back, as well as why did you move back?
All right, so I was a student, Polytechnic Montreal. I have my little ring here, civil engineering class of 2014. And I was supposed to stay in Canada. I was supposed to start a career at CIMA Plus, but then Commission Charbonnet happened. And I decided to just move back to Rwanda a little bit, just to take a bit of the sun, enjoy the easy life for 6 months, put all my stuff in storage, got here, got an amazing job as a junior product manager in an energy project. And it's been 6 years now.
Okay, perfect. And quickly, for those who don't know, what's the Commission of Charbonnet you talking about?
It's
Or
there
how
was a
that, what is it? Sorry, and how did that impact your life essentially?
Right. So Commission Charbonneau was a corruption scandal in the construction industry in Quebec. So basically, there was a lot of contracts that were linked to some politician, and the mafia, the Italian mafia, was behind. So what happened is Charbonneau, I think, is the name of the judge. They launched a world commission, and while everything was happening, most of the big firms, including SNC-Lavalin, CIMA Plus, ICOM, I think all of them were embodied in this corruption scandal. So actually, that's where I realized corruption is not a third world problem. It's actually also happening in those countries. So don't let them tell you otherwise. And so all the products were frozen. People were getting laid off. And obviously, as a civil engineer, construction is our main employer. So all the companies were not hiring, and they were actually letting people go. So there was no job prospects for me.
Perfect, thanks. So it's been 6 years that you've been back in Rwanda. You've done
Yeah.
quite a few things, worked at the job you mentioned. You also founded and built GroceWheel, and that's
Yeah.
the main reason why we're having this conversation. What is it, and where did the idea for GroceWheel come from?
Okay, so GroceWheels was an online grocery delivery service, and that was like the face of the business. But mainly we were a global food supplier. We were supplying households, we were supplying hotels with food stuff, fresh vegetables, imported goods, and what have you. And the idea came up, as I said, I was working in the energy sector, so most of my projects were not in Kigali. I was traveling up country. My driver would always get, buy food stuff on the side of the road. I think that's pretty common in most African countries. And then when I inquired about that, he said that, most of the stuff are less expensive up country because that's where they are produced. I did quick math, transport was not the reason. The following day, I actually went to the food market. I did a cost analysis. I realized actually based on the information and based on basically the lack of information of the clients, like you could basically double the price between the upcountry, so the farmer, and the end user, which is people like you and I and businesses. So as an opportunity, Jumia was doing well. I think most of your audience will be aware of Jumia in Africa at least. And I capitalized on that and I started GroceWheels, food and so grocery delivery. And I sold the company 3 years later to a Japanese e-commerce conglomerate. That's mainly the story
So
in a
you sold
nutshell.
the company, so life is good now.
Listen, life was supposed to be good, but I think I realized how I love entrepreneurship. So I went into something else. So I'm back to the hustle. But I realized it's actually my comfort zone. So it's quite
Perfect.
interesting.
Excellent. And then, so from that company you built and you sold, obviously you created value.
Yeah.
Obviously, you solve a lot of problems. Can you touch on the impact that uh, starting and growing that company made? Just touch on who and how you change people's lives, no matter if it's your client, essentially.
Yeah. So changing people's lives, it was mainly making life easier for people. So I realized that, and it's common to many African countries, you just give money to your house worker to do grocery shopping for you. Most of you go to the supermarket, but when it comes to fresh products, you send your house worker to the food market. So it was also, first of all, a way to control what you, so let's say you give them $50, they buy stuff, you eat them. You don't know exactly how much you consume and how much you actually spend. So one of the first thing was putting you back in control. The second thing was also, I grew up in Africa, so I'm used to have a household with like 2, 3 house helpers, but our generation, we cannot afford that anymore. And that's also one of the reality check we have to go on with. Like life is becoming expensive. So you only have one house worker, so you can't afford to have him spend, 5 hours a day at the food markets. So that was also another point I resolved. It's like basically make the most of your money. We all have a smartphone, you can use it. The other point, I actually also allowed to bring like kind of professional supply. I didn't reach that point, but the idea was to also get food traceability. I was trying to get certified. HACCP is HACCP, which is a certification in the food industry. So to allow like those restaurants and hotels to kind of have a traceability in their food stuff. Rwanda is a country that is positioning itself for the MICE industry. So MICE is everything convention, meetings, and exhibitions. So it's very important to know where the food comes from and what is the traceability for that. So that's another kind of impact I made. And I think the most important one is I was actually trying to, there's this thing in the industry they call how many hands touch your product. So I was really trying to really cut off those hands. So giving my clients the best product at the best price, but also bringing most of the value to the farmer because they were getting ripped off. So I was kind of the middle person between those two worlds. And that's probably one of the impact I'm most happy and proud of.
Perfect. I wouldn't have thought that, especially in Africa, that delivery would work because, as you mentioned, I would think that, hey, I get somebody to, a maid or somebody, a house helper to do whatever. But I'm really looking forward to diving into the details of your business model during the workshop. And the last question for now is going to be based on your experience. It's been 6 years. You've done a lot. You worked at a company, you built a company, you sold a company. Now you're moving into the more financial space. And now you've probably seen a lot of people moving back from abroad, etc. What are your advices or areas where you see that we as returnees need to work on? What are your advices? What have you seen us do wrong, or the mistake we've seen us make that you say, hey guys, just watch out for this?
Yeah. So number one is, I'm going to say it's know where you come from, in the sense that I won't say all of us, I won't not have the protection, but most of us basically, like I was lucky enough to have parents that could send me to Canada. I was a foreign student, so all the costs that come with that. So I was fortunate enough to kind of have this background. So when you move back, I belong to what we call the 1%. So let's make it louder. We belong to the 5% wealthiest people in the country in terms of education, in terms of means, also in terms of connection. That is not the reality. There's a world population out there, you don't know how they live. So, the fact we can go out spend $50 a night, some people make $50 a month. So you have to be aware that what you see around you is not necessarily the reality of the country. And as I love my country and I see it on TV, we are doing a lot of good things. But then again, I have to be aware that some people still actually live in mud houses. And the goal is actually, even for our countries, like to lower it. And we've been doing a lot of work, but the majority of the people doesn't live with more than, let's say, $500 a month. And that's even like a high amount. So if you're looking for a company, or even to start a company, if you are just even looking to just kind of come back home and like get used to how it's working, to understand, remember that you don't necessarily belong to the same social how can I say it, milieu social in French, than everybody else. That's number one. Number two, come with a lot of humility. Like, you have a lot to learn. Like, we are highly educated. Like, I did Polytechnic Montreal. It's like one of the best engineering school in North America. But you come back and ultimately, you don't know how it works around here. It's all about connection. It's all about like social norms. Like, just really learn how the country operates. Like, for example, I knew Rwanda. I speak the language. I knew a lot of people, but I knew a lot of people that were there during the summer, like basically diaspora like me. So come September, October, you find out that like the locals here, you don't necessarily have a lot in common with them. So the challenge is to learn from them and have the humility to understand how it works here. And I made a lot of mistake of being a patient, of thinking that, you know, everything is like in Canada, you come, everything is clear. So you give paper, they have to sign. And I would probably say it more during the workshop, but even like closing my first investment and just going to the public notary, and, you know, just because I came with a lot of, I won't say attitude, but just expectations. And now I can say lack of humility. My investment took longer and I'm almost frustrated investor. And for me, it was the notary's fault. But when I think about it, it was my attitude toward it. And that's also something I learned the hard way. And I would say the third one, I think it kind of goes with both, is like having assumption from the Western world. So as I said, delivery worked in Rwanda simply because, one, there's basically no corruption in Rwanda. So that means my trucks can go from one side of the city to the other without being stopped and ask for a tip here and there. We are very good in ICT. Like Rwanda invested a lot of money in, I mean, we're a landlocked country, not so much natural resources. So we have to be like a country where, like the Switzerland and Singapore of Africa. So everything was organized. When people think about Rwanda, so basically my main job was actually finding something that could work and just piggy bank on the reputation of Rwanda. So you really need to adapt your environments. In another country, let's say, I don't know, Kenya, Nigeria, you will have been larger, but maybe I will have faced other situations. So you really need to find out what can and cannot work in your country. And adapt to it, and, you know, play the game. I can't wait to tackle like issues like corruption or things like that you have to deal with. But yeah, you really need to adapt to your current situation. And I know, for example, my business will not have worked the exact same way in Cote d'Ivoire, in Nigeria, in Ghana, or whatever.